Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Clayton Ridge wiped his hands on the shop rag, motor oil staining his fingers black despite the scrubbing. The late afternoon sun slanted through the garage doors of Ridge Auto Repair, casting his shadow across the concrete floor where he'd spent the last 12 hours rebuilding a transmission. His back ached, but the pain felt good. Honest work always did.
Dad, you coming home soon? Kieran's voice carried from the office doorway.
The 10-year-old clutched his notebook against his chest, pencil marks smudged on his fingers. "Give me 10 minutes, kiddo."
Clayton glanced at his son's face. Something seemed off.
Kieran's usual bright eyes looked dim, like someone had turned down a light inside him.
"You okay?"
"Yeah." The word came too quick, too flat. Clayton set down his wrench.
"What you drawing today?"
Kieran shrugged, hugging the notebook tighter. "Just stuff." 3 months ago, Kieran would have shown him every sketch, chattering about the cars he'd drawn or the comic book heroes he'd invented. Now the boy guarded his art like state secrets.
"Mom's making dinner," Kieran said. "She said to tell you not to be late. Tell her I'll be right there." Kieran nodded and disappeared.
Clayton watched him go, that familiar knot forming in his stomach. Something was wrong with his son, but every time he tried to dig deeper, Kieran clammed up. The drive home took 5 minutes through Ben's quiet suburbs. Clayton pulled into the driveway of their ranch house, noting how Mara had planted new flowers along the walkway. Yellow roses. She'd always loved yellow. He found her in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and she'd changed into a dress unusual for a Tuesday night. She smiled when she saw him, the same smile that had made him fall in love 15 years ago.
"Smells good," he said, kissing her cheek. Her perfume was different, stronger. "Pot roast. Your favorite." She turned back to the stove.
"How was work?"
"Busy."
Mrs. Henderson's Honda needed a new clutch. Jimmy's truck still won't start. "Think it's the alternator." MMM. She wasn't really listening. Her phone buzzed on the counter as she glanced at it quickly before stirring the gravy harder. "Everything all right?"
Clayton asked.
"Of course.
Why wouldn't it be?"
"Because you haven't really looked at me in weeks," he thought. "Because you used to ask about my day and actually care about the answers. Because you've been checking your phone every 5 minutes like you're waiting for something." "Just checking," he said instead. Dinner passed with small talk about the weather and Kieran's school. Mara chattered about her book club and a new recipe she wanted to try. All surface conversation, like strangers making polite noise. Kieran pushed food around his plate without eating much. "You feeling sick, buddy?" Clayton asked. Kieran shook his head. "Just not hungry." "You've been like this all week," Mara said. "I think he's going through a phase." "What kind of phase?" Clayton studied his son's face. "You know how kids get. Moody, distant." She reached over and ruffled Kieran's hair. The boy flinched slightly, pulling away from her touch. Clayton caught the movement. "Kieran, may I be excused?" Kieran asked, not meeting either parent's eyes. "Of course, honey," Mara said. "Go finish your homework." After Kieran left, Clayton helped clear the dishes. Mara hummed while she loaded the dishwasher, seeming happier now that their son was gone. Another red flag. "I'm thinking of going to Mom's this weekend," she said casually. "Taking Kieran with me. Give you some time to catch up on work." "I don't need time to catch up. I'd rather spend the weekend with you two." "You work so hard, Clayton. You deserve a break." He studied her face. She wasn't meeting his eyes either. "Since when do you want to visit your mother? You usually complain about her for weeks after." "I'm trying to be a better daughter." She closed the dishwasher and started it running. Besides, Kieran could use some time away. Change of scenery might help with his mood. Clayton nodded, but something felt wrong about the whole conversation. Mara was pushing too hard, like she needed them gone for reasons she wasn't sharing. Later that night, he found Kieran in his room, drawing by the light of his desk lamp. Clayton knocked on the doorframe. "Can I come in?" Kieran nodded, but quickly closed his notebook. Clayton sat on the edge of the bed. "You sure you're okay? You've been quiet lately." "I'm fine. Your mom thinks you're going through a phase." Kieran's pencil snapped in his grip. "I'm not going through anything." "Hey." Clayton kept his voice gentle. "Talk to me. What's going on?" For a moment, Kieran looked like he might say something. His mouth opened, then closed. He stared at his hands. Nothing, he whispered. Clayton wanted to push, but something in his son's posture warned him off. Whatever was happening, Kieran wasn't ready to talk about it. You know you can tell me anything, right? Anything at all. Kieran nodded, but he still wouldn't look up. I love you, kiddo. Love you too, Dad. Clayton kissed the top of his head and left him alone. In the hallway, he paused outside his own bedroom. Mara was inside, talking quietly on the phone. He couldn't make out the words, but her tone was different, softer, more intimate than the voice she used with him that he knocked and entered. She was sitting on the bed. Phone pressed to her ear. I have to go, she said quickly into the phone. Talk tomorrow. She hung up and smiled at him. Just talking with Janet about book club. At 9:30 at night, she works late. It's the only time she can call. The explanation came too smooth, too rehearsed. Clayton nodded and headed for the bathroom to brush his teeth. In the mirror, he studied his own face. 39 years old, graying at the temples, lines around his eyes from squinting at engine parts. Maybe Mara was bored with him. Maybe she needed something he couldn't give her, but that didn't explain Kieran's behavior. Kids didn't get moody because their mother was having a midlife crisis. He spit toothpaste into the sink and tried to ignore the voice in his head telling him that something was very wrong in his house. The next 2 weeks brought more of the same. Mara continued her late-night phone calls, always hanging up when Clayton entered the room. She started going out more, shopping trips that lasted hours, book club meetings that ran past midnight, coffee dates with friends he'd never met. And Kieran got quieter. Clayton started paying closer attention. He noticed how his son tensed whenever Mara entered a room, how Kieran avoided being alone with her, how the boy's drawings had changed from comic book heroes to darker images, shadowy figures, and twisted faces that made Clayton's stomach turn. Thursday night, Clayton came home early from the shop. The house was quiet except for the sound of the shower running upstairs. He found Kieran in the living room, curled up on the couch with his notebook. Where's Mom? Shower, Kieran said without looking up. Clayton sat beside him. What are you working on? Kieran hesitated, then opened the notebook to a fresh page. The drawing made Clayton's blood run cold. A woman with long dark hair stood over a small figure chained to the ground. The woman's face was twisted in anger, her eyes wild. The child's face was turned away, but Clayton recognized the messy hair, the slight build. Kieran. His voice came out rough. What is this? Nothing. Just a story. This isn't nothing. Clayton pointed at the chained figure. Is this you? Kieran's hand shook as he closed the notebook. It's just pretend. Who is the woman? Nobody. Kieran, look at me. Clayton waited until his son met his eyes. Is someone hurting you? The shower upstairs stopped running. Kieran glanced toward the ceiling, fear flashing across his face. No, he whispered. Nobody's hurting me. But his eyes said different. His eyes said help me. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Mara appeared in the doorway, her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing a robe Clayton didn't recognize, something silky and expensive. You're home early, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Finished up the Peterson job. Clayton studied her face. We were just looking at Kieran's drawings. Something flickered in her expression. He's been drawing some strange things lately. I think he's been watching too much television. We don't let him watch anything violent. Kids find ways to see things they shouldn't. She moved closer, putting her hand on Kieran's shoulder. The boy went rigid. Don't you, honey? Kieran nodded quickly. Can I go to my room? Of course. Mara's grip on his shoulder tightened briefly before she let go. Finish your homework. Kieran hurried from the room, clutching his notebook. Clayton watched him go, noting how the boy practically ran to get away from his mother. He's been having nightmares, Mara said casually. I think that's where the drawings come from. What kind of nightmares? The usual kid stuff. Monsters. Bad people. She adjusted her towel. I'm going to get dressed. Dinner in an hour. She left before he could answer. Clayton sat alone in the living room, staring at the spot where his son had been sitting. Everything in him screamed that Kieran was in trouble, but he had no proof. Just drawings and intuition and the growing certainty that his wife was lying to him about everything. That night, he waited until Mara fell asleep, then crept down the hall to Kieran's room. His son was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep," Clayton whispered. Kieran shook his head. Clayton sat on the edge of the bed. "Bad dreams. Sometimes. Want to tell me about them?" Kieran was quiet for so long that Clayton thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "In my dreams, someone I love hurts me, and I can't tell anyone because they won't believe me." Clayton's chest tightened. "Who hurts you in the dreams?" Kieran turned his face toward the wall. "I can't say." "Why not?" "Because then the dreams might come true." Clayton stayed with him until Kieran finally fell asleep, but he lay awake for hours afterward, staring at the darkness and trying to understand what was happening to his family. Friday morning brought answers he didn't want. He'd forgotten his lunch at home and drove back to get it. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw a strange car parked across the street, a black BMW with tinted windows. When he entered the house through the back door, he heard voices from the living room. Mara's voice and a man's. Clayton moved quietly down the hallway, staying out of sight. "Can't keep doing this," the man was saying. "What if he finds out?" "He won't." Mara's voice was different, warmer, more alive than she'd sounded with Clayton in months. "He's too trusting. And the kid, Kieran won't say anything. I made sure of that." Clayton's hands clenched into fists. "Made sure how?" "I don't like this, Mara. Maybe we should wait." "Wait for what?" "For Clayton to grow a brain? He'll never suspect anything." She laughed, and the sound made Clayton's skin crawl. "He thinks I'm having a book club crisis. Poor, bored housewife needs more excitement." "So what's the plan?" "This weekend, I'm taking Kieran to Mom's house. Clayton will stay here, work on his precious cars. Sunday night, we make our move." "You sure about the kid?" "He's seen us together. He won't be a problem much longer." The words hit Clayton like a physical blow. "Won't be a problem." They were talking about his son like he was an obstacle to remove. "I should go," the man said. "Your husband might come home." "He won't. He never does during the day." Clayton heard movement, the sound of the front door opening and closing. He waited until he heard the BMW drive away before entering the living room. Mara was adjusting her hair in a mirror, humming softly. "Forget something?" she asked when she saw him. "My lunch." He kept his voice steady. "Who was that?" "Who was who?" "I heard voices." Her reflection smiled at him. "The TV. I was watching a movie." The lie came so easily it almost impressed him. She was good at this, too good. How long had she been lying to him? How long had she been lying about everything? "Still planning to visit your mother this weekend?" he asked. "Of course. Kieran's looking forward to it." Another lie. Kieran was terrified of something, and now Clayton was beginning to understand what. "Maybe I should come with you." "No." The word came too sharp, too fast. She turned from the mirror, her smile brittle. "I mean, you have that big repair job. Mrs. Patterson's van, right? You can't leave work." Mrs. Patterson's van had been finished 2 days ago. "Right," Clayton said. "The van." He grabbed his lunch from the kitchen and left, his mind racing. Mara was having an affair, that much was obvious. But what had she done to Kieran to ensure his silence? And what did she mean by the kid won't be a problem much longer? Clayton drove back to the shop, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. By the time he reached Ridge Auto Repair, he'd made a decision. He wasn't letting Mara take Kieran anywhere. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Clayton's mood. He'd spent the night awake, trying to figure out how to keep Kieran home without tipping off Mara that he knew something was wrong. Direct confrontation wouldn't work. She was too good at lying, too practiced at manipulation. He needed proof of what she was doing before he could act. But he couldn't let her take Kieran to her mother's house. Not when every instinct screamed that his son was in danger. Mara hummed while she packed, moving between their bedroom and Kieran's with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this trip carefully. Too carefully. "You sure you don't want me to come?" Clayton asked, watching her fold Kieran's clothes into a small suitcase. "Positive. You hate visiting Mom, and she's not particularly fond of you either." She didn't look up from the packing. "Besides, Kieran and I need some bonding time. Just the two of us." Kieran stood in the doorway of his room, watching his mother pack his things. His face was pale, his hands clenched around his notebook. "I don't want to go," he said quietly to Mara's hands stilled for just a moment. "Of course you do, honey.
Grandma's excited to see you. Can't Dad come too? Dad has work to do. Her voice carried a sharp edge. And I already told Grandma it would just be us. Clayton saw the fear in his son's eyes and made his decision. You know what? The Peterson job can wait. I'll come with you. No. Mara's voice cracked like a whip. I mean, that's not necessary. Kieran will be fine. I want Dad to come, Kieran said, his voice stronger now. Mara turned to face them both, her smile frozen in place. Clayton, we talked about this. You need to finish that transmission. It can wait. The customer needs it Monday. I'll work Sunday night if I have to. For a moment, something ugly flickered across Mara's face, a flash of anger, so intense it made Clayton step back. Then the smile returned, bright and false. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. If you insist. Relief flooded Kieran's features. He ran to Clayton and hugged him around the waist, holding on tight. Thanks, Dad. Clayton ruffled his son's hair, noting how thin the boy had gotten. Wouldn't miss it, kiddo. But even as he said it, Clayton saw the calculation in Mara's eyes. She was already adjusting her plans, figuring out how to work around this new obstacle. The drive to Lorraine's house took 3 hours through winding mountain roads. Kieran sat in the back seat, quietly drawing in his notebook while Mara navigated. She'd been silent since they left, communicating only when necessary. How much farther? Clayton asked. 20 minutes. Mara's voice was clipped. Mom's expecting us for lunch. Clayton remembered Lorraine from their wedding, a sharp-faced woman with cold eyes who'd made no secret of her belief that her daughter was marrying beneath her. A mechanic wasn't good enough for her precious Mara. The house sat on 50 acres of woods and meadow, a 2-story farmhouse that had seen better days. Lorraine appeared on the porch as they pulled up, her arms crossed over her thin chest. Clayton, she said when they got out of the car. I wasn't expecting you. Last-minute decision. He lifted their suitcases from a trunk. Hope that's not a problem. Of course not. But her smile was as fake as her daughter's. Kieran, come give Grandma a hug. Kieran obeyed reluctantly, accepting a brief, cold embrace before stepping back toward Clayton. Lunch was an awkward affair. Lorraine and Mara talked about people Clayton didn't know, making pointed comments about successful men who'd made something of themselves. Kieran barely ate, pushing food around his plate while glancing nervously between his mother and grandmother. You're not eating much, Lorraine observed, fixing Kieran with a sharp stare. Not hungry, Kieran mumbled. Children should be grateful for good food, Lorraine said. In my day, kids ate what was put in front of them. He's fine, Clayton said. Kids go through phases. Phases. Lorraine sniffed. What children need is discipline. After lunch, Mara suggested a walk around the property. Clayton agreed, hoping some fresh air might help Kieran's mood. They followed a dirt path through the woods, Kieran walking close to Clayton's side. There's the old doghouse. Mara pointed to a weathered structure near the edge of the clearing. I used to play there as a child. Clayton examined the small building. It looked more like a prison than a playhouse, windowless, with a heavy chain attached to a post driven deep into the ground. What was the chain for? He asked. Dad kept a dog out here for a while, Mara said casually. Big German shepherd. Mean as hell. Kieran had gone very still beside him. Clayton looked down at his son and saw pure terror in the boy's eyes. We should head back, Kieran whispered. Please, Dad. In a minute. Clayton knelt beside his son. You okay? Kieran nodded, but his face was pale as paper. That evening, after dinner, Clayton found himself alone with Lorraine while Mara put Kieran to bed. The older woman poured herself a glass of wine and settled into her recliner. Mara says you've been having problems with the boy, she said without preamble. What kind of problems? Acting out. Being difficult. She sipped her wine. Children need a firm hand. Mara was never afraid to discipline him properly. Something cold settled in Clayton's stomach. What do you mean properly? Sometimes children need to learn that actions have consequences. Mara understands that. What consequences? Lorraine's smile was thin and cruel. Whatever it takes to teach respect. Clayton excused himself and went upstairs to check on Kieran. He found his son sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed. Why aren't you in pajamas? I want to go home, Kieran whispered. Please, Dad. Can we go home now? What's wrong?
What are you afraid of? Kieran looked toward the door, then back at his father. If I tell you something, will you believe me? Always. Even if it sounds crazy. Try me. Kieran took a shaky breath. Mom hurts me sometimes. When you're not home. She says if I tell anyone, she'll hurt me worse. The words hit Clayton like a punch to the gut. How does she hurt you? She gets really angry about little things. Like if I spill something or make noise when she's on the phone. She says I'm ruining everything. What does she do when she gets angry? Kieran's hands shook as he opened his notebook. He flipped to a page Clayton hadn't seen before, a drawing of a child tied to a post. A woman standing over him with something in her hand. She brought me here once before, Kieran whispered, when you were at the shop late. She chained me to that doghouse and left me there all night. Said it was to teach me a lesson about keeping my mouth shut. Clayton's vision went red around the edges. When was this? 2 weeks ago. She said if I ever told you, she'd do worse things. She said you wouldn't believe me anyway because I'm just a kid and she's your wife. Clayton pulled his son into his arms, holding him tight, while rage built in his chest like a wildfire. Everything made sense now. Kieran's fear, the drawings, the way he flinched whenever Mara touched him. I believe you, he said fiercely, and I'm never going to let her hurt you again. She's coming, Kieran whispered, hearing footsteps in the hallway. Clayton quickly closed the notebook and stepped back as Mara entered the room. Everything okay? She asked, her eyes moving between them. Kieran was just telling me about school, Clayton said, his voice carefully neutral. Ready for bed, buddy? Kieran nodded and climbed under the covers. Mara bent to kiss his forehead, and Clayton saw his son go rigid with fear. Sweet dreams, she murmured. In their own room, Clayton waited until Mara was asleep before slipping out of bed. He went to the window and looked out at the yard, spotting the doghouse in the moonlight. The chain glinted silver in the darkness. His hands shook with the effort of not killing his wife where she lay. But he had to be smart about this. He needed proof, needed to document what she'd done. And he needed to get Kieran somewhere safe before Mara realized he knew the truth. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he'd take his son and leave this place forever. But when morning came, he discovered that Mara had anticipated his plans. Clayton's not feeling well, she announced at breakfast. Food poisoning, I think. You're going to rest today while Kieran and I spend some quality time together. Clayton tried to speak, tried to move, but his body wouldn't obey. His vision was blurry, his thoughts scattered. The coffee. She drugged his coffee. Don't worry, honey, Mara said, her voice sounding like it came from underwater. You just rest. Kieran and I will be fine. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was his son's terrified face as Mara led him from the room. Clayton woke to the sound of rain against the windows and a splitting headache that felt like someone had taken a hammer to his skull. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, but it was the wrong angle, too high, too bright. He squinted at the clock on the nightstand and saw it was past 2 in the afternoon, that he'd been unconscious for hours. Memory flooded back the drugged coffee, Mara's fake concern, Kieran's terrified face. Clayton bolted upright despite the wave of nausea that crashed over him. Mara, he called out, his voice hoarse. Kieran. Silence answered him. Clayton stumbled to his feet, his legs unsteady. The house felt empty, hollow in a way that made his skin crawl. He checked every room upstairs, then made his way down to the main floor. No sign of his wife or son anywhere in the kitchen. He found a note propped against the coffee maker. Gone to town for supplies. Back later. Rest up. She was lying. She'd never gone to town. She'd taken Kieran somewhere while Clayton was unconscious. Somewhere he couldn't follow. He grabbed his phone and called her number. It went straight to voicemail. Mara, where are you? Where's Kieran? Call me back. Now. Clayton paced the kitchen, fighting off the lingering effects of whatever she'd given him. His thoughts were still fuzzy, but one thing was crystal clear: his son was in danger. He called Lorraine's landline. The old woman answered on the third ring. Where's Mara? He demanded. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Don't play games with me. Where did she take Kieran? Mara can take her son wherever she pleases. She doesn't need permission from you. The line went dead. Clayton stared at the phone, his hands shaking with rage and fear. Lorraine knew something. She was part of this, Whatever this was, he needed to search the property. If they were still here, still somewhere on these 50 acres, he'd find them. Clayton grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and headed outside. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft and muddy. He could see tire tracks leading away from the house toward the main road, but there were also footprints, smaller ones that could belong to Kieran. The footprints led toward the woods. Clayton followed them, his heart pounding. The trail was faint but visible in the mud, 2 sets of prints, one adult, one child. The adult prints were deeper, as if the person was walking with purpose. The child prints were uneven, sometimes stumbling, sometimes dragging, like someone being forced to walk. The trail led deeper into the woods, past the clearing where they'd walked yesterday. Clayton moved as quietly as he could, listening for any sound that might lead him to his son. Then he heard a faint voice calling for help. "Water," the voice whispered. "Please, water." Clayton's blood turned to ice. It was Kieran's voice, weak and desperate. He crept forward through the trees until he could see the clearing ahead. What he saw there stopped his heart. Kieran was chained to the doghouse, just like in his drawings. A metal cuff around his ankle connected to the heavy chain Clayton had seen yesterday. His son was on his knees in the mud, his clothes torn and dirty, his face streaked with tears and grime. And standing over him was Mara. She held a plastic water bottle in her hand, just out of Kieran's reach. The boy stretched toward it, his chain pulling tight. "Please," Kieran whispered. "I'm so thirsty." "Are you sorry?" Mara asked, her voice cold and clinical. "Yes, I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" For telling Dad lies about you." "And what are you going to tell him when we get home?" "Nothing. I won't tell him anything." Mara smiled, an expression so cruel it made Clayton's stomach turn. "Good boy." She held the bottle closer, letting Kieran think he could reach it. Then, just as his fingers touched the plastic, she pulled it away and poured the water onto the ground. "Oops," she said with mock sadness. "Maybe next time you'll remember to keep your mouth shut the first time." Kieran collapsed, his small body shaking with exhaustion and defeat. "Please," he sobbed. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Clayton saw red. Every muscle in his body coiled like a spring as pure rage consumed him. This woman, this monster, had tortured his son, had chained him like an animal and left him to suffer in the mud, but he stepped into the clearing. "Get away from him." Mara spun around, her eyes wide with surprise. "Clayton, you're awake." "I said, get away from him. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you chained my son to a doghouse and left him to die." Clayton's voice was deadly quiet. "Move. Now." Mara backed away, her hands raised. "You don't understand." He needed to learn. Clayton grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against a tree. "He's 10 years old. He was going to ruin everything," she gasped, clawing at his hands. "He saw us together. He was asking questions." "So you tortured him?" "I was teaching him respect." Clayton's grip tightened. For a moment, he wanted nothing more than to squeeze until she stopped breathing, to end this monster who'd hurt his child. But Kieran needed him. He shoved Mara away and ran to his son. The chain was secured with a heavy padlock, but Clayton had tools in the truck. He'd left them in the glove compartment after their last camping trip. "I'm here, buddy," he whispered, gathering Kieran into his arms. "I'm here. You're safe now." Kieran collapsed against him, his small body burning with fever. "Dad, right here. I'm going to get you out of this." Clayton looked around for something to break the chain. A rock, a stick, anything. But the chain was too heavy, the lock too strong. "The key's in the house," Mara said behind him. She was leaning against the tree, watching them with an expression that was almost bored. "In my purse." Clayton wanted to leave her there and go get the key, but he couldn't risk her running away. She was part of this, had planned this. She might have other keys, other ways to disappear with Kieran. "Give me your phone," he ordered. "What?" "Because I'm calling the police." "I don't think so." Mara straightened, her composure returning. "You have no proof of anything. It's your word against mine. I have my son chained to a doghouse. Children play games. They get into things they shouldn't. Accidents happen." Clayton stared at her, amazed by her calm confidence. She really believed she could lie her way out of this. "Kieran, can you walk?" he asked gently. His son tried to stand but collapsed immediately. The fever and dehydration had taken too much out of him. Clayton made a decision. He picked up Kieran, chain and all, and started walking toward the house. "Where are you going?" Mara called after them. "To get the key. And then we're leaving. You can't take him. He's my son too." Clayton stopped and turned back to her. "You lost the right to call him your son the minute you put that chain on his ankle." Back at the house, Clayton kicked in the door to the bedroom where he and Mara had slept. Her purse sat on the dresser, and he dumped its contents onto the bed. Among the usual debris of makeup and receipts, he found a small silver key. Kieran had passed out during the walk back, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. Clayton freed him from the chain and carried him to the couch, wrapping him in blankets and trying to get water into him a few drops at a time. Mara entered the house as if nothing had happened, smoothing her hair and adjusting her clothes. "He needs a hospital," Clayton said without looking at her. "He's fine. A little dehydrated, that's all. A little dehydrated." Clayton's voice rose. "He's been chained outside for hours. Look at him." Kieran's lips were cracked and bleeding, his skin pale and clammy. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his breathing was shallow and rapid. "Children are resilient," Mara said dismissively. "He'll be fine once he rests." Clayton couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What's wrong with you? This is your son. Don't lecture me about my son. Then explain this to me. Explain why you chained a 10-year-old boy to a doghouse." Mara was quiet for a long moment, studying her fingernails. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and matter-of-fact. "He caught me with Eli." "Who's Eli?" "Eli Madsen. He owns the gym downtown." She looked up at Clayton with cold eyes. "We've been together for 9 months." 9 months. While Clayton was working 16-hour days to support his family, his wife was having an affair. "And Kieran saw you 3 weeks ago. Eli came to the house while you were at work. Kieran was supposed to be at school, but he came home sick." Mara shrugged. "Kids have terrible timing. So you decided to torture him." "I decided to teach him the importance of family loyalty." Her voice was getting harder, more defensive. "He was going to tell you. Can you imagine? A 10-year-old boy threatening to destroy his parents' marriage." Clayton felt like he was talking to a stranger. This wasn't the woman he'd married, the woman who'd cried when Kieran took his first steps, who'd stayed up all night when he had fever. "You were destroying the marriage," he said. "Not him. I was trying to save it." Mara's composure finally cracked, and real emotion leaked through anger, resentment, something ugly and bitter. "Do you know what it's like, Clayton? Being married to someone who cares more about carburetors than conversation, who comes home covered in grease and expects me to be grateful for the privilege. So you had an affair. I found someone who actually sees me, who makes me feel alive instead of invisible." Her eyes blazed. "Eli understands me in ways you never could. And Kieran threatened to ruin that." "Yes. So I taught him what happens when children interfere in adult business." Clayton looked down at his unconscious son, then back at his wife. "You chained him to a doghouse. I taught him respect. You tortured him. I disciplined him." The casual way she said it, like she was discussing the weather, made Clayton's skin crawl. There was no remorse in her voice, no recognition that what she'd done was monstrous. "He needed to learn that actions have consequences," Mara continued. "That little boys who threaten their mothers get exactly what they deserve. He's 10 years old enough to know better." Clayton felt something snap inside him. All the years of marriage, all the love he'd thought they shared, it was gone, burned away by the sight of his son in chains. "Get out," he said quietly. "Excuse me. Get out of this house. Now." Mara laughed to sound like breaking glass. "This is my mother's house, Clayton. You can't throw me out. Then I'll leave. I'm taking Kieran to the hospital, and then we're going home. Don't follow us. You can't take him. He's my son. Not anymore. The law says different." Clayton stood up, his hands clenched into fists. "The law will be very interested in what you did to him. Will they? Because all I see is a boy who got himself into trouble playing where he shouldn't. Children do that, you know. They get into dangerous situations. I saw you pour water on the ground while he begged for it. You saw what you wanted to see. But who's going to believe you? A mechanic with anger issues?" She smiled, and it was the most hateful expression Clayton had ever seen. "I'll tell them you've been abusive. that you hit Kieran when you drink, that he came to me for protection. I don't drink. You will. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be a drunk who beats his family. And Kieran will back me up. Won't you, honey? She looked down at the unconscious boy with mock affection. Children are so impressionable, so easy to influence. Clayton realized with growing horror that she meant every word. She was already planning her next move, already figuring out how to spin this to her advantage. You're insane, he whispered. I'm practical. Eli and I have plans, and we're not going to let a stubborn man and his bratty son ruin them. What plans? Mara's smile widened. Wouldn't you like to know? Clayton got Kieran to the hospital in Bend, where doctors confirmed what he already knew: severe dehydration, exhaustion, and signs of physical abuse. The marks on Kieran's ankle from the chain were clear evidence of what had happened. But when the police arrived to take Clayton's statement, everything started to fall apart. So you're alleging that your wife chained your son to a doghouse? Detective Martinez asked, his pen poised over his notepad. I'm not alleging anything. I saw it with my own eyes. And where is your wife now? Still at her mother's house, I assume. I brought Kieran straight here. The detective nodded. We'll need to speak with her, of course. Get her side of the story. Her side. Clayton couldn't believe what he was hearing. There's only one side. She chained my son to a doghouse and left him there. I understand you're upset, Mr. Ridge, but we have to investigate these allegations properly. 2 hours later, Detective Martinez returned with news that made Clayton's blood run cold. I spoke with your wife, he said. She tells a very different story. Of course she does. She says you've been drinking heavily for the past several months, that you've become increasingly aggressive and paranoid. That's a lie. She says your son has been acting out because he's afraid of you, that he ran away yesterday and got himself tangled up in that chain while hiding in the woods. Clayton felt the trap closing around him. And you believe her? She seemed very credible, very concerned about her son's welfare. Martinez consulted his notes. She also mentioned that you have anger management issues, that you were violent with her in the past. I've never laid a hand on my wife. She has pictures, Mr. Ridge, bruises on her arms. She says you grabbed her earlier today. Clayton remembered slamming Mara against the tree, remembered the fury that had consumed him when he saw Kieran chained up. He'd left marks, given her exactly the evidence she needed. She was torturing my son, he said desperately. I was trying to stop her. That's not what she says happened. The detective's tone was professional but skeptical. Clayton could see it in the man's eyes. He believed Mara's story. The crying, concerned mother was more believable than the angry husband with grease under his fingernails. Where's Kieran now? Clayton asked. Child Protective Services is evaluating the situation. He'll stay in protective custody until we sort this out. Protective custody? He needs to be with me. I'm sorry, Mr. Ridge, but given the allegations, we can't allow that right now. Clayton felt like the ground was disappearing beneath his feet. What allegations? That I hurt my own son. Your wife has filed a restraining order. She's alleging domestic violence and child abuse. This is insane. She's the one who hurt him. The judge will decide that. In the meantime, you need to stay away from both your wife and your son. Clayton was escorted from the hospital by security, told that any attempt to see Kieran would result in his arrest. He sat in his truck in the parking lot, his hands shaking with rage and helplessness. Mara had outplayed him. She turned his rescue of Kieran into evidence of his own guilt, spun a story that painted her as the victim and him as the abuser, and the system believed her. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have minded your own business. M. Clayton stared at the message, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about covering up an affair. This was about something bigger, something Mara and her lover had planned in advance. They'd wanted him out of the picture. The abuse of Kieran, the false allegations, it was all part of a larger scheme that he needed help. He needed someone who understood how the system worked, someone who could fight Mara's lies with facts. That he needed his sister. J.C. Norris lived in a small apartment above a coffee shop in downtown Bend, her home office crammed with law books and case files from her work as a paralegal. When Clayton showed up at her door at midnight, she took one look at his face and poured him a drink. Tell me everything, she said. Clayton laid out the whole story: the affair, the abuse, Kieran's terror,
the discovery at the doghouse. JC listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Jesus Christ, she whispered when he finished. That sick bitch. She's got everyone convinced I'm the abuser. The police, CPS, probably the judge who signed a restraining order. Not everyone. JC's eyes were sharp, calculating. I know Martinez. He's a good cop, but he's old school. Sees a crying woman and automatically assumes she's the victim. So what do? We build a case. Real evidence, not just accusations. She flipped through her notes. You said Kieran was drawing pictures of the abuse? For weeks. I thought they were just nightmares. We need those drawings. And we need to talk to people who might have seen something, teachers, neighbors, anyone who interacted with Kieran regularly. Clayton nodded. His art teacher, Mr. Doyle. He's been worried about Kieran's change in behavior. Good. What else? Buck Maddox. He's an old Army buddy of mine. Lives off the grid, but he knows about surveillance, tracking. If Mara's planning something bigger, he might be able to help us figure out what. JC made more notes. We need to be careful about this, Clayton. If they catch us investigating, it'll look like harassment. We have to be smart. Smarter than Mara. A lot smarter. She's had months to plan this. We're playing catch-up. The next morning, Clayton met with Mr. Doyle at the elementary school. The art teacher was a gentleman in his 50s who'd taught kids for over 20 years. I've been wondering when someone would ask about Kieran, he said, leading Clayton to his classroom. That boy's been troubled for months. What kind of trouble? Mr. Doyle pulled out a folder full of Kieran's artwork. See for yourself. The drawings told a story that made Clayton's heart break. They started normally superhero sketches, cartoon characters, the usual things a 10-year-old boy would draw. But over the past few months, they'd gotten darker. Scarier. This one really worried me, Mr. Doyle said, pointing to a picture of a woman with long dark hair standing over a small figure. The woman held something in her hand, a rope or a chain. He drew it about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Right around the time Kieran caught Mara with her lover. Did you talk to him about it? I tried, but he clammed up, said it was just a story. Mr. Doyle shook his head. I should have pushed harder. Should have called someone. It's not your fault, isn't it? I'm trained to spot signs of abuse. But I kept thinking, well, his mother seemed so nice when she came to parent conferences. So concerned about his education. Clayton studied the drawings, seeing his son's terror captured in crayon and pencil. Can I have copies of these? Of course. Whatever you need. From the school, Clayton drove to Buck Maddox's cabin in the mountains. Buck lived 20 miles outside of town on a patch of land that wasn't on any official map, a perfect setup for someone who valued privacy above all else. Clayton found his old friend chopping wood behind the cabin, his movements efficient and precise despite being in his mid-40s. Clay. Buck set down his axe and embraced him. Been too long. Wish I was here for a better reason. Buck listened to the story with the same intensity he'd once brought to military briefings. When Clayton finished, the older man was quiet for a long moment. Your wife's good, he finally said. Military-level operational planning. Can you help me? That depends. How far are you willing to go? Clayton thought about Kieran chained to that doghouse, about Mara's cold smile as she poured water on the ground. However far it takes. Buck nodded. Then we'd better get started. 3 days of investigation revealed the scope of Mara's betrayal. Working with JC's legal connections and Buck's surveillance expertise, Clayton began to piece together a conspiracy that went far beyond a simple affair. Look at this, JC said, spreading financial documents across her kitchen table. Mara opened a second bank account 6 months ago. She's been moving money out of your joint account a little at a time. Clayton studied the statements. How much? $30,000 so far. All transferred to an account in her name only. She's been planning this for months. Gets worse. Buck slid a manila folder across the table. I ran a background check on Eli Madsen. Guy's got a record fraud, identity theft, assault. He's been in and out of prison for the past 15 years. Clayton flipped through the documents. Eli's criminal history painted a picture of a man who made his living by manipulating people, usually women. Think he targeted Mara specifically? Clayton asked. Makes sense. Married woman with access to money. Husband who works long hours. Buck shrugged. Perfect mark. But why involve Kieran? Why not just take the money and disappear? JC looked up from her laptop. Because they're not just stealing money. They're stealing identity. She turned the screen toward Clayton. On it was a passport application in Kieran's name, but with a different last name and date of birth. They're planning to take him with them. Clayton breathed. Creates a better cover story. Happy family relocating for a fresh start. JC's voice was grim. Harder for authorities to track a family than a single man with a criminal record. Clayton felt sick. Where are they going? Best guess. Somewhere without extradition treaties. Belize, maybe, or Costa Rica. Buck pointed to another document. Mara's been researching both countries online. When? Soon. The passport application was expedited. They're paying extra to get it processed within the week. Clayton stared at the evidence spread across the table. Mara hadn't just betrayed him, she'd planned to steal his son and disappear forever. The abuse, the false allegations, it was all designed to separate Clayton from Kieran long enough for them to vanish. We have to stop them, he said. We will. JC gathered up the documents. But we need more evidence. Something that proves Mara's been lying about the abuse. I know exactly what we need, Buck said quietly. But you're not going to like it. Clayton looked at his friend. What? We need to let them think they're winning. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. I'm not using my son as bait. You won't have to. They're going to make a move soon. They have to, with the passport coming through. When they do, we'll be ready. That night, Clayton sat in his empty house, staring at the photos on the mantel. Pictures of happier times, family vacations, Kieran's birthday parties, Christmas mornings. All of it a lie, apparently. All of it just a cover for whatever game Mara had been playing. His phone rang. JC's name appeared on the screen. I just got off the phone with Martinez, she said. CPS is recommending that Kieran be placed in foster care. What? Why? They think the home environment is too unstable. With you and Mara fighting over custody, they want to remove him from the situation entirely. Clayton felt the last piece of his world crumble. When? Tomorrow morning. We can't let that happen. I know. Buck's already making arrangements. What kind of arrangements? The kind we don't talk about over the phone. Meet us at the old quarry road at midnight. The line went dead. Clayton sat in the darkness, understanding that everything was about to change. One way or another, this ended tomorrow. The quarry road wound through dense forest for 3 miles before ending at an abandoned mining site. Clayton found Buck waiting beside his truck, a collection of electronic equipment spread across the tailgate. Surveillance gear, Buck explained as Clayton approached. Cameras, microphones, GPS trackers. Military grade. Where did you get all this? Better you don't know. Buck held up a device the size of a matchbox. This is what we need. Audio transmitter with a 12-hour battery life. Range of 2 miles. JC emerged from the darkness, carrying a laptop bag. I talked to my contact at CPS. Kieran's being moved to a foster home tomorrow at 10 a.m. Which foster home? The Hendersons. Nice family, but they live 40 miles out of town. Perfect place for Mara and Eli to intercept the transport. Clayton felt his stomach drop. You think he'll try to grab him? I know they will. JC opened her laptop and showed him a series of emails. These are from Mara's account. She's been in contact with Eli, planning exactly that. Clayton read the messages, his anger building with each line. They discussed Kieran like he was cargo to be moved, not a frightened child. They're going to stage a rescue, Buck said. Make it look like Mara's protecting Kieran from an abusive foster system. By the time anyone realizes what happened, they'll be on a plane to Central America. So what's the plan? Buck held up the tiny transmitter. We let them think they succeeded, but we make sure we can hear every word they say. How? Kieran needs to be wearing this when they grab him. If we can record them admitting to the abuse, admitting to the kidnapping plan, we'll have them dead to rights. Clayton shook his head. I'm not putting my son in danger. He's already in danger, JC said gently. This is the only way to save him. What if something goes wrong? What if they hurt him? They won't. Buck's voice was certain. They need him healthy and cooperative for their plan to work. The abuse was about control, not violence. Now that they think they've won, they'll treat him better. Clayton wanted to argue, but he knew they were right. Kieran was already at risk, already being used as a pawn in Mara's game. This might be their only chance to stop her. How do we get the transmitter to him? I've arranged a visit, JC said. 15 minutes, supervised at the CPS office. You'll be saying goodbye before he goes to foster care. Mara will be there. Exactly. She'll want to play the concerned mother one last time. Make sure everyone sees her as the victim. Buck handed Clayton the transmitter. It's got an adhesive backing. Press it anywhere on his clothing, inside a pocket, under his shirt collar. He won't even feel it. Clayton stared at the tiny device, weighing his son's safety against their need for evidence. There's something else, JC said quietly. Buck found out where they're planning to take him after the rescue. Where? Lorraine's house. They're going to hold him there while they finalize their travel plans. That place is isolated. No neighbors for miles, which is why we'll be watching it. Buck showed him a map marked with red X's. I've got cameras positioned around the property. Motion sensors on all the access roads. The moment they show up with Kieran, we'll know. Clayton nodded slowly. It was a good plan, maybe their only chance. But the thought of letting Mara take his son, even temporarily, made him sick. I want to be there when they grab him, he said. Absolutely not. Buck's tone was firm. If they see you anywhere near the transport, they'll abort. You have to let this play out. My son needs to know I'm coming for him. He will, but not until it's safe. The next morning, Clayton sat in the CPS office, watching through a one-way window as Kieran was brought in for their final visit. His son looked small and scared, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for escape routes. Mara was there too, playing her part perfectly. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, telling the social worker how difficult this was for everyone. I just want what's best for Kieran, she said, her voice breaking, even if it means being separated from him. Clayton wanted to vomit. When they brought him into the room, Kieran ran to him immediately. Dad, are you okay? They said you were sick. I'm fine, buddy. Clayton hugged him tight, feeling the transmitter in his pocket. How are you holding up? I want to come home. I know. Soon, okay? I promise. Clayton glanced around the room. The social worker was watching them closely, but she was focused on their faces, not their hands. Mara was turned away, talking to another official. This was his chance. I need you to be brave for me, he whispered to Kieran, slipping the transmitter into the boy's jacket pocket. Can you do that? I'm scared. I know, but I'm going to get you out of this. I promise. The visit ended too soon. Clayton watched helplessly as they led Kieran away, the boy looking back over his shoulder with desperate eyes. It's going to be okay, Mara told Kieran, putting her arm around his shoulders. The boy stiffened but didn't pull away. Everything's going to be fine. Clayton hoped his son could hold on just a little longer. The transport van was supposed to leave at 10 a.m. sharp, but it was delayed by paperwork until almost 11. Clayton and Buck watched from a distance as Kieran was loaded into the vehicle with 2 social workers and a security guard. Now we wait, Buck said, adjusting his earpiece. Signals coming through clear. They could hear everything the social workers trying to make conversation. Kieran's quiet response is the sound of the highway beneath the van's tires. 20 minutes into the drive, Buck's radio crackled. Black sedan approaching from behind, he reported. 2 occupants. Clayton's heart pounded. Is it them? Can't tell yet. But the timing's right. Through the earpiece, they heard Kieran gasp. Then a man's voice, authoritative and commanding. Pull over. Now. What's going on? One of the social workers asked. Police. There's been a development in the case. Clayton recognized the voice, Eli Madsen. The transmitter was working perfectly. I don't see any police cars, the security guard said. Unmarked unit. Pull over and keep your hands where I can see them. The van slowed to a stop. Clayton heard car doors slamming, footsteps on gravel. Where's your identification? The security guard demanded. Right here. There was a sound like fabric tearing, then a grunt of pain. Anyone else want to be a hero? Don't hurt them. Kieran's voice, small and frightened. Nobody's getting hurt if everyone cooperates, Eli said. You 2 out of the van. Kid stays with me. You can't do this, one of the social workers protested. This is kidnapping. This is a rescue. The kid's father is dangerous. We're taking him somewhere safe. Clayton heard Mara's voice for the first time. It's okay, Kieran. Mommy's here. I don't want to go with you. I know you're scared, honey. But Dad's been saying terrible things about me, telling lies to turn you against me. He didn't tell me anything. Of course he did. That's what abusers do. They isolate their victims from people who care about them. Clayton clenched his fists, listening to Mara twist the truth with sickening skill. Get in the car, Kieran, Eli ordered. Now, what about them? Kieran asked, probably referring to the social workers. They'll be fine. Just a little walk back to town. Clayton heard car doors slamming again, then the sound of an engine starting. They're moving, Buck reported, heading north toward the mountains, toward Lorraine's house. Exactly where we expected. For the next hour, Clayton listened to Mara and Eli's conversation, each word providing more evidence of their plan. How long until the passport's ready? Eli asked. 2 days, maybe 3, and the money, all transferred to the Cayman account. 45,000. Clayton's jaw tightened. They'd stolen more than he'd realized. What about the kid's father? What about him? By the time anyone figures out what happened, we'll be long gone. He seemed pretty determined at the hospital. Clayton's an idiot. He thinks the world runs on fairness and justice. Mara laughed, a sound like breaking glass. He'll spend months fighting through the legal system while we disappear. And if he gets too close... There was a pause. Then Mara's voice, cold and calculating. Then we make sure he can't follow us. Clayton felt ice in his veins. She's talking about killing me. Buck nodded grimly. We got enough. Time to move. They drove to Lorraine's property, parking half a mile away and hiking through the woods to Buck's surveillance post. From there, they could see the house and the black sedan parked in the driveway. Motion sensors show 3 adults, 1 child, Buck reported, all inside the house. Through the transmitter, they could hear Lorraine greeting her daughter and granddaughter. About time you got here, the old woman said. I was starting to worry. Everything went perfectly, Mara replied. No complications. What about the boy? He'll behave. Won't you, Kieran? I want to call my dad. Your dad can't help you now, Lorraine said. He's probably in jail by now. Domestic violence charges, I imagine. Dad never hit anyone. That's not what the police think. Mara's voice was smug. Poor Clayton. Such a violent man. Such a terrible father. Clayton had heard enough. He started to rise, but Buck grabbed his arm. Wait. Let them incriminate themselves completely. How long before they leave for the airport? Day after tomorrow, according to the passport timeline. I'm not leaving Kieran with them for 2 days. You won't have to. Listen. Eli's voice came through the transmitter. I don't like this. The kid knows too much. He's seen us together, heard us talking. So what do you suggest? Mara asked. Maybe he doesn't make it to Belize. The silence that followed made Clayton's blood run cold. You're talking about murdering a child, Lorraine finally said. I'm talking about loose ends, Eli replied. The kid's a witness. Witnesses are dangerous. He's 10 years old enough to testify in court. Clayton was already moving, Buck right behind him. They'd heard enough. More than enough. Call the police, Clayton said as they ran toward the house. Already did. They're 10 minutes out. That's too long. Clayton burst through the front door without knocking. The 3 adults were in the living room, Kieran sitting on the couch between his mother and grandmother. Get away from him, Clayton ordered. Eli jumped to his feet, reaching for something under his jacket. Clayton was faster, tackling the younger man to the ground before he could draw whatever weapon he was carrying. They rolled across the floor, Eli throwing wild punches while Clayton tried to pin him down. The man was strong but undisciplined, all rage and no technique. Clayton's military training took over, and within seconds he had Eli in a chokehold. Dad! Kieran scrambled off the couch and ran to him. It's okay, buddy. I'm here. Mara stood frozen, her face pale with shock. How did you find us? Clayton pulled the transmitter from Kieran's pocket and held it up. You've been broadcasting for the past 3 hours. You recorded us. Lorraine's voice was shrill with panic. That's illegal. Invasion of privacy. Kidnapping's illegal too. So is child abuse. Clayton kept his grip on Eli's throat. So is conspiracy to commit murder.
Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "You won't be able to prove anything," Mara said, but her voice shook. "It's your word against ours. Actually, it's your own words against you." Buck appeared in the doorway, holding a digital recorder. "Everything you said in that car, everything you said in this house. All recorded." The police arrived moments later, followed by Detective Martinez and a team from Child Protective Services. Clayton finally released his grip on Eli, who gasped and rolled away, clutching his throat. "You're under arrest," Martinez said, snapping handcuffs on Eli. "Kidnapping, conspiracy, child endangerment." Mara tried to run, but Buck blocked the back door. She turned to face Clayton, her mask finally slipping completely. "You bastard," she snarled. "You've ruined everything." "You ruined everything the minute you heard him," Clayton replied, pulling Kieran closer as they led Mara away in handcuffs. She turned back one last time. "This isn't over," she called out. "I'll get out. I'll come for him." "No," Clayton said quietly. "You won't." The media explosion was immediate and vicious. JC had contacted a local podcaster who specialized in true crime stories, and within hours of the arrests, the story was everywhere. The Chains We Hide, a boy's real-life prison, became the most downloaded podcast episode in the show's history. The audio recordings of Mara and Eli discussing their plans, combined with photos of Kieran's injuries and his disturbing artwork, painted a picture of systematic abuse that shocked the community. Clayton found himself at the center of a media storm he never wanted. Reporters camped outside his house, his shop, even Kieran's school. Everyone wanted to know how a mother could chain her own child to a doghouse, how the system had almost failed an innocent boy. "We need to get you out of town for a while," JC advised during a meeting at her apartment. "Let things cool down." "I'm not running," Clayton said. "This is our home." The attention isn't good for Kieran. He needs time to heal. Clayton looked at his son, who was drawing quietly in the corner. The boy had barely spoken since the rescue, answering questions with nods and shakes of his head. "What do you think, buddy? Want to take a trip somewhere?" Kieran looked up from his drawing. "Can we go camping? Just you and me?" "Absolutely." They spent 2 weeks in the mountains, far from reporters and lawyers and court dates. Clayton taught Kieran how to fish, how to build a proper campfire, how to identify animal tracks. Slowly, gradually, his son began to talk again. "Why did Mom hurt me?" Kieran asked one night as they sat by the fire. Clayton had been dreading this question, but he owed his son an honest answer. "Sometimes people get sick in their minds," he said carefully. "It makes them do terrible things to people they're supposed to love." "Was she always sick?" "I don't know. Maybe she was good at hiding it." Kieran poked at the fire with a stick. "I used to love her." "That's okay. You can still love the person she was before she got sick, but not the person she became." "No, not the person she became." When they returned to town, the legal machinery was already in motion. Eli had been denied bail and was facing multiple felony charges. His criminal history and the recorded evidence made conviction almost certain that Mara's case was more complicated. Her attorney argued that she was a victim of Eli's manipulation, that he had coerced her into abusing Kieran. But the recordings told a different story. They showed a woman who had participated willingly, even enthusiastically, in planning her son's kidnapping. "The prosecution is confident they can get a conviction," JC reported. 20 to life for Mara, probably life without parole for Eli. "What about Lorraine?" "Accessory charges. She'll probably do 5 to 10 years. Clayton nodded. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to balance what they'd done to Kieran, but it was justice. The trial began 3 months later. Clayton testified about finding Kieran chained to the doghouse, about the systematic abuse his son had endured. The courtroom was packed with reporters and supporters, people who had followed the story and wanted to see justice done. When the recordings were played, several jurors wiped away tears. The casual way Mara and Eli discussed harming a child, the complete lack of remorse in their voices, shocked even the judge. Mara's testimony was a disaster for the defense. She tried to maintain her innocence, claiming the recordings were taken out of context, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the prosecutor played Kieran's recorded voice begging for water, followed by Mara's laughter as she poured it on the ground, the jury's faces turned to stone. The verdicts came back after less than 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Eli received life without possibility of parole. Mara got 30 years. Lorraine was sentenced to 8 years for her role in the conspiracy. They led Mara away in shackles. She turned to look at Clayton one last time. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undiluted. "Enjoy your victory," she said. "But remember, I'll be out someday. And when I am, I'll find you both." Clayton stood up in the gallery. "No," he said, his voice carrying across the courtroom. "You won't." The months following the trial brought unexpected changes. The media attention, while overwhelming, had a positive effect on Clayton's business. People came from all over the state to have their cars repaired by the man who had saved his son from a monster. Ridge Auto Repair expanded, adding 2 more bays and hiring 3 additional mechanics. Clayton found himself with more work than he could handle, but he made sure to leave time for what mattered most, being Kieran's father. The boy was healing, slowly but surely. He'd started speaking in full sentences again, laughing at jokes, showing interest in things beyond his artwork. The drawings were still dark sometimes, but they were balanced now by pictures of happier things: camping trips, fishing expeditions, father and son working side by side in the garage. "Dr. Peterson says I'm making good progress," Kieran reported after his weekly therapy session. "How do you feel?" "Better. Still scared sometimes, but better." Clayton hugged him. "It's okay to be scared. What happened to you was scary. But it's over now, right? Mom can't hurt me anymore." "Never again," Clayton promised. "I won't let anyone hurt you." JC had used her newfound fame to launch a nonprofit organization called Father's Rights Alliance, helping men who found themselves on the wrong side of false accusations. The podcast had brought in enough donations to fund their operations for years. "We're getting calls from all over the country," she told Clayton during their monthly dinner. "Fathers who need help, kids who need protection. The system's broken, but we're fixing it one case at a time." Buck had decided to come back to civilization, at least partially. He'd moved to a cabin closer to town and started offering security consulting services. His military expertise and technological skills were in high demand. "Got a call from the FBI yesterday," he told Clayton. "They want me to help with a task force on domestic terrorism." "You gonna take it?" "Maybe. Depends on the pay." The 3 of them had become an unlikely family: the mechanic, the paralegal, and the survivalist. They met for dinner every Sunday, sharing stories and planning their next moves in the fight against family court corruption. But the most satisfying change was in Kieran himself. 6 months after the trial, he came running into the shop with a huge grin on his face. "Dad, look what I drew." Clayton wiped his hands and examined the picture. It showed a man and a boy standing in front of a house, the sun shining overhead. Both figures were smiling. "That's us," Kieran explained. "At our new house." "New house?" "The one we're going to build. Just you and me. No monsters allowed." Clayton smiled, his throat tight with emotion. No monsters allowed. 2 years had passed since the trial, and Clayton was putting the finishing touches on the new house Kieran had drawn. It sat on 10 acres outside of town, far enough from the city to provide privacy, but close enough for Kieran to attend his new school. The boy had grown 3 inches and gained 15 pounds, his hollow cheeks filling out as he rediscovered the joy of being a kid. He made friends at school, joined the art club, even started playing Little League baseball. Clayton was installing the last window when Kieran came running up the hill from the bus stop. "Dad, look what Mr. Doyle said about my drawing." He handed over a paper with a gold star sticker and a note. "Kieran, this is beautiful work. You have a real gift. Keep drawing." The picture showed a strong man holding a little boy's hand as they walked away from a burning house. The flames reached high into the sky, but the 2 figures were walking towards sunshine. "Tell me about this one," Clayton said, though he thought he understood. "That's us leaving the bad place behind," Kieran explained. "The fire burns up all the scary stuff so it can't follow us." Clayton hung the drawing on the wall of his new office, right next to his workbench where he could see it every day. Below it, he placed a small plaque that read, "Some things you rebuild, some things you leave in ashes." That evening, as they sat on the porch of their new home, Kieran asked the question Clayton had been expecting. "Do you ever think about forgiving Mom?"
Clayton was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and orange. No, he said finally, and I never will. Is that wrong? Some things can't be forgiven, buddy. Some things shouldn't be forgiven. Like hurting kids, especially like hurting kids. Kieran nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. I don't forgive her either. You don't have to. You don't owe her anything. Good, because I'm never going to. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. Father and son united in their refusal to excuse the unforgivable. The past was behind them, burned away like the house in Kieran's drawing. What lay ahead was theirs to build, brick by brick, day by day. Clayton reached over and ruffled his son's hair. Ready for dinner? Yeah. Can we have pizza? Whatever you want, kiddo. Whatever you want. As they walked inside their new home, Clayton felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the peace of forgiveness or reconciliation, but the peace of justice served and debts paid in full. Some victories came through mercy. This one had come through fire.